Welcome to the AI for Career Success video overview by Curt Robbins, where we help you get smarter than your competition. I'm your host, Susan Johnson. Today, we're deconstructing a fascinating discussion that's been making the rounds, prompted by a Wall Street Journal article from January 4th, 2026, about a food many of us know very well, pizza.
So the whole conversation really kicked off with a single provocative question. Is America's love affair with pizza actually over? Now, that's a pretty bold thing to ask. For decades, pizza has been a cornerstone of American food culture. But the question is its dominance starting to wane? Let's look at the data that sparked this entire debate.
Okay, so here's the chart that really got people talking. For a long time, pizzerias were the second most common type of restaurant in the United States. But now, they've slipped to number 4. They've actually been surpassed by both coffee shops and Mexican restaurants. Now, that is a truly significant shift in the national restaurant landscape. So does this slip in the rankings mean we've all collectively decided to stop eating pizza? Well, as is often the case, the headline doesn't really tell the full story. We need to look beyond the initial myth and get to the reality of what's actually happening in the market. And this slide illustrates that disconnect perfectly. The headline suggests a very simple narrative: Americans are just sick of pizza. But the data points to something far more nuanced. What we're actually seeing is a massive, incredibly mature market that is simply no longer the automatic default choice for every occasion. It's not a story about collapse, it's a story about evolution. To really understand this shift, we need to introduce a new term for it: peak pizza. This is the core concept here. It describes that specific state a market reaches when it's so large and established that its days of easy, rapid growth are behind it. From this point on, it has to contend with entirely new pressures related to price, competition, and quality. And when we say this market is massive, we are not exaggerating. To put it in perspective, even with this slowing growth, U.S. pizza chains still generated around $31 billion in revenue in 2024. This isn't a dying industry by any stretch of the imagination. It's an absolute giant. And it's a giant that remains a fundamental part of daily life. According to USDA data, on any given day, 1 out of every 10 Americans still eats pizza. So we haven't stopped eating it. The crucial point here is that our relationship with pizza is simply becoming more complex. So what are these new pressures and complexities? Let's break down the first major factor, which is the price problem. Pizza's traditional value proposition, what it promised the consumer, is beginning to erode. And this sentiment is captured perfectly in this direct quote from a consumer. It really sums up the frustration quite well. People are looking at the prices and concluding that for what it costs, they can create a better product themselves at home.
For generations, pizza was a simple answer to the question, what can we get that will feed the whole family affordably? It was the quintessential convenient, low-stress meal. But as prices continue to climb, that fundamental promise is starting to fade, and consumers are definitely taking notice.
All right, the next major pressure point is the new reality of food delivery. For decades, if you wanted food brought to your door, pizza was essentially the only game in town. It owned the delivery kingdom. Well, not anymore. Today, the delivery landscape is a jungle. Thanks to the explosion of third-party apps, pizza's old monopoly has been completely disrupted by an incredible variety of options. You can get poke bowls, Thai curry, sushi, tacos, really anything you want, just a few taps away. Pizza is no longer the sole convenient option. It's just one of many. And the third key driver is a widening split within the pizza world itself, what we can call the quality divide. The way consumers perceive the big national chains versus their local independent pizzerias is changing, and it's changing dramatically. And this isn't just an outside observation. The major players in the industry are acutely aware of it. Here's a quote from the chief financial officer of Papa John's. He states it plainly: the industry is being disrupted, and it's the consumer who is driving that disruption. This table breaks that divide down quite clearly. On one side, you have the large chains. Here, the consumer perception is often one of inconsistent or lower quality, which forces them into a cycle of price wars and promotions to compete. On the other side, you have the independents, which are often perceived as higher quality and more authentic, discovered through social media. Their challenge is different. They have to meet rising, sometimes impossibly high customer expectations. They are fighting two completely different battles. So why does the story of pizza matter if you're not in the restaurant industry? Well, it's because what's happening here is a classic lesson for any massive, mature market, regardless of the industry. This is the typical life cycle.
First, that explosive, easy growth phase comes to an end. Then, consumer expectations begin to evolve. They start demanding more, whether that's better quality, a better price, or greater convenience. And finally, for a business to survive and thrive, it has to completely reinvent what value means to its customers.
And this brings us to the core thesis of this entire analysis. This isn't a story about America falling out of love with pizza. It's a story about America falling out of love with paying a premium for an average, uninspired product. We still value pizza. Our standards have just become higher.
So we'll end with this thought. The story of peak pizza serves as a perfect case study. It forces us to ask a critical question. When any giant industry hits maturity and the easy growth is gone, what does it really take to win? What separates the brands that fade from those that innovate, adapt, and ultimately redefine success? Thank you for watching. This is where we teach you AI and help you get smarter than your competition. We recommend you subscribe to the AI for Career Success YouTube channel. And please like, comment, and share this video to help us reach a wider audience.